Does anyone have a question?
Stuart, this is Jason here. Could you talk about different kinds of Shakti?
What do you mean, different kinds of Shakti?
Like, does it ever manifest in different ways?
Well, if Shakti is the energy of spirit, it's the energy of a higher nature manifesting through, teachers, but it also manifests as everything that exists in life is a manifestation of higher energy in the universe. The good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, it's all a manifestation of higher energy. So yes, it would be a manifestation of Shakti. But as I explained in a class earlier, Shakti is neither positive or negative. It's neither one. It's just energy. It's energy of spirit. It comes from a higher source of energy in the universe. And when it comes into a human being, for instance, it manifests, in their life according to the way they are living their life. If a person is living with their heart closed, with their minds yakking all the time, with a lot of neurosis, anxiety, if they're alcoholics, if they're junkies, this is how the energy is going to manifest. It doesn't come into them. Please try and sit still. It doesn't come into them, as positive or negative. It flows through them and then manifests in the world according to their level of elevation, according to their consciousness. And it's the same thing with animals. It doesn't go into an animal, it's energy. But what the creature is, their temperament, their, whatever, their fear, how they live, that's how the energy manifests in the lives of animals, the lives of insects, in the lives of everything. So what we're trying to do here is to develop a chakra system that's strong enough, that's clear enough, that's simple enough, refined enough, so that when the Shakti flows into us, it manifests in our lives as love, as compassion, as joy, as creativity, a lack of fear, a lack of insecurity. That's the work of each and every one of us. And perhaps that's how we differ from animals, is we can do that kind of work. And I hope this is clear to all of you. You can't sit around thinking that Shakti is positive and negative. It's not, it's just energy. That depends entirely upon the amount of work a human being does. That's how it manifests. When I was a young man, I was angry, I was upset, I had everything. That's how the energy manifested. As I got older and developed a spiritual life, it's manifesting differently now. Just because I'm a different person than I was, 40 years ago. Now, this comes back to each and every one of us, what we do and how we develop our inner lives. Are we serious about a spiritual life? Are we serious about getting balance, quieting the mind, opening the heart? And if we make the effort and do what is essential to produce a system like that, the Shakti is going to come through us with love, with joy, with compassion, forgiveness. I mean, all of these words that exist in every language in the world that people somehow forget because they've never developed a system inside themselves that enables the Shakti to manifest that way. Not saying everybody, there are people that have developed those kinds of systems and you see it in them. There's something kind in them. There's something compassionate about them. I hope this is clear. This is really an important part of this meditation, because when you begin to recognize this, you begin to take full responsibility for your life. You can't blame anybody else or anything else. You take full and total responsibility for your condition in the world and how you live your life. I mean, I don't know how to make it any clearer, frankly. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? And then you can take a look in the mirror and say, this is me. You know, there are things I don't like about me that have to change. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It's really making the effort to change.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very good question. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? And, you know, just to finish, I like that a lot. I learned that from Rudy. You know, please try and sit still, everybody. I learned that from Rudy, you know, because I was a young person blaming the entire world, you know, for my unhappiness. And I had to change. And I had to take full responsibility for my inner condition. And when I started doing that, things started to change. I began to see the world differently. I began to see, you know, beneath the tensions that other people manifested in my life, that there was something deeper inside everybody. And most of the tensions that people manifest and the way they treat the world is just, I mean, basically they're just reaching out for love. They just want to touch life somehow. It's like that character in that book, Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov, you know? The only way you know how to touch the world is to kill that old woman. And from that point on, it was all about, you know, forgiveness and love and, you know, finding himself. And you know, I taught enough in prisons and institutions of that nature to know that most people are, you know, that wind up in those places, all they're seeking is love. They're so starved inside that they're so angry inside, and they're so blaming the world for their condition that they strike out at the world and they wind up, you know, living years of their lives in a prison. This requires really deep inner change. It requires, you know, there's a great word in the New Age, you know, transformation. This requires remarkable transformation of a human being. It's a metamorphosis. It's, you know, it's a, you know, a tadpole becoming a butterfly, or a frog, or a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, you know? It's a lotus flower growing out of muddy water. That metamorphosis, that change is essential if one is going to have a spiritual life. And it's a change that we have to really consciously make an effort to do for the rest of our lives. Because it's so easy to slip back into all the old bullshit, you know, unless we make that kind of effort to change, to work, to go deeper. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? Somebody ask a question. You got me on a roll here. The universe is providing a lot of stuff.
Well, Stuart, then I'll I'll ask you to just talk about patience, in the light, because you said you climb a mountain and you get to the top and then you realize it's an anthill,
Yeah.
right? And the time and the growth. And so can you talk to patience around this work?
Well, look, if you stop at a red light and you decide, no, I'm not going to, and you drive and you wind up in an accident, you got to have patience for the light to change. You have to have patience for the new vision to come inside you, the new growth to manifest inside you. You have to have patience to be able to move from one level of consciousness to another. It all requires patience. And I've said it 1,000 times, I'll say it again. One of the greatest aphorisms I ever heard regarding patience came out of Rudy. When he told me one day, he said, it takes 9 months to have a baby. You got to patiently wait those 9 months. It takes 1 second to die. I mean, I've never heard it put better. It takes time to give birth to yourself. It takes time to overcome years of conditioned behavior. Excuse me, it takes time to get your mind quiet, to get your heart open. Because we live in a whole, dysfunctional reality. And we think that's reality, and it's not, it's just dysfunction. And it takes time to get out of that milieu. It takes time, and you have to have patience, and you got to be able to do the work, and you can't sit around. I mean, I remember when I was in Texas and we built that incredible house, and you kept going to the guys working there. When is it going to get done? Well, 3 weeks, yeah. And 3 weeks took 8 months. Rudy told me you're going to be living in Texas for 3 weeks. I want you to go. And 3 weeks took 9 years for me to work my way free of the situation. I had to have patience. And I had to develop consciousness that enabled me to recognize when the cycle was finished and I could move on. Without that patience, it's just rejection. You walk away from your responsibility. My responsibility was to do what Rudy asked me, was to build an ashram there. I did. And there was nothing else for me to do there, and I had to move on. But it took 9 years for that reality to be clear to me. And that was after building that house and running an ashram and bakeries and restaurants. Oh God, what was going on there? And a friend of mine, he was a truck driver there. I used to really like this guy. And he came up to me and he said, Stuart, you're the first person. This guy was like probably 75 years old, He was born in Denton. He said, you're the first person I ever met who really goosed this town. I mean, you had the audacity to have a belly dancing club in Denton, Texas. I mean, it was true. And there was, and there were lines out the door of people waiting to get in to be entertained. I mean, it took all of that for me to recognize ultimately when the cycle was finished. I also did it because I needed to entertain myself. I basically I wanted somebody, why did you open a restaurant? I says, nobody to eat in this town. You have to have a restaurant here, But it took patience and doing all that work, creating all of those situations, and arriving at a place in myself where, Stuart, it is time to move on. The cycle has finished itself. I mean, one of the guys who really pinched me was the guy who ran a funeral home across the street from the ashram. I'll never forget that guy. Used to be kind of a friend of mine. And I met him on the street one day and he said, Stuart, I buried the best of them. I buried doctors, I buried lawyers, senators, judges. And I said, Jack, you're not going to bury me. I'm getting out of debt. I think 6 months later I left, or a year later I left, you know. But it takes patience and it takes the willingness to do the work until the work fulfills itself, until you really have completed the cycle. Without doing that, you know, you're always stuck. You're always rejecting, walking away, not, well, you know, why do I have to do this? Why the hell did I have to live in Denton? You know, it's probably, you know, before, you know, Denton, I lived in Paris for almost 5 years. I lived in London. I lived in Berlin. You know, I lived all over the map, Marrakesh, Greece, for God's sake. And here I was in Denton, Texas. And I realized, Stuart, you have work to do here. And what you really have to do is to build an inner life. An inner life that will get you one day strong enough to move back to New York and do what you have to do in New York. And it took 9 years. Does anyone else have a question you would like to ask?
Stuart.
Yes.
Is there a difference between the unconditional love from higher energy in the universe and Shakti, which is neutral? Is it these different energies?
No, there is no difference. You know, it's like putting gasoline in your car, you know? You need to run. That energy makes it possible for us to live, to be active, to live in the world. And it's unconditional. It nurtures the worst tyrants that live on the planet Earth. It nurtures everything. It gives birth to everything that exists here. It just depends, again, on the person and how their inner life is developed. And if their inner life is developed with love, with spirit, with consciousness, that's how it manifests. If their inner life is developed with greed and anger and being pissed off at the universe, and that's how it manifests. That is our responsibility here. I hope you all understand that. To do inner work so that when this energy comes, it really helps us work out our karma. We attain a state of unconditional love, of surrender, depth, you know, et cetera, all the things I talk about. But it comes unconditionally. You know, it's like in the Bhagavad Gita, I don't know how many of you have ever read that, you know, they talk about the battlefield of truth. And it's two families up against each other, you know, and the spirit is nurturing, you know, Krishna, who's in the chair, is nurturing the whole thing. It's, you know, ultimately hoping to create some kind of harmony, balance, which is truly the story of every human being. So what it comes back to is we have to take responsibility for ourselves. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? You know, I say it, I quote it all the time, but I love it. You know, it's like from Shakespeare, it's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Why does it signify nothing? Because time and death and everything in the universe eats it all up. So it becomes the drama of the moment. In one of my books, it's like a fart in a hurricane, you know? Stinks for a moment, and then one day it's missing, you know, it's gone. What happened, you know? Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? Okay, then there'll be meditation on Wednesday. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Happy Heart Chakra Day. I hope you all had wonderful days today, full of love and, you know, and as I always end this with a lot of gratitude for all of you being here. I mean, for what manifests in these classes, because frankly, I listen to this too. I'm here to learn also. And the relationship that we have in these classes that we have makes it possible for not only you to learn, but for me to learn and for all of us to grow. So bless you for being here. And we'll have a class on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you. Good night.
Night, Stuart. Thank you.
Good night. Bye.